What up, my good people? Let's talk about that thing that keeps so many people broke, in debt, buying things they don't need, connecting external goods to their internal being. Consumerism. What is consumerism? Consumerism is the preoccupation of society to acquire material goods, mainly goods we don't even really need, right? How did it start and who started it? Well, there was the first and the second industrial revolution and World War I. Right after that, a guy named Edward Bernays popped on the scene. And let's note this up front. Edward Bernays, he thought the average person on earth was a complete idiot. He thought they needed guidance and leadership from elites. He was outspoken about this. He had no faith in the average man to make good decisions. And that's the everyday man, unless you was in that elite club. He was an American theorist. So after the World War I and the Second Industrial Revolution, there was an excess of goods that America had, and they needed to get it off their hands. Now, at the same time, there was the process called urbanization going on, an influx of people from the rural country areas into the city areas. He collaborated with a lot of psychologists to understand groupthink. Actually, he was the nephew of Sigmund Freud through marriage, probably the most popular psychologist ever. So Bernays, he studied groupthink, he learned people, he collaborated with psychologists, and he started eggs and bacon as the American breakfast. He was the father of public relations, as far as the media and stuff, relaying information to the general public. And he was the grandfather of modern consumerism. He got the Guatemalan president overthrown by spreading propaganda about him being a communist, and the guy wasn't even a communist. And note that propaganda is just the way the media frames information to present it to the public in a way that so it conveys a certain message about information or belief or ideology, right? So you can take the same information and the way you present it and frame it, you prime it, it can be viewed in different ways. So that's what propaganda does. And it's used negative a lot, but it doesn't have to be negative. So after the first and second industrial revolution, World War I, the tobacco company hired Edward Bernays. He had already got people to eat eggs and bacon. He hadn't already done numerous other things. He had stripes already. The tobacco company hired him because they were missing out on about 50% of their potential customers, women. They were missing out on women. It was a social stigma for women to smoke in public. It was taboo. Women didn't smoke in public like that back then. So whenever he wanted to promote an agenda, he knew it was three main modes of transmission. Number one, you had to be everywhere at once. You had to be on the TV, newspaper, magazine, tabloids. However you can go viral in 1929, that's what he had to do. The next thing he did, which was probably the most important, was he learned a way to connect external goods with the internal self. Before that, people left it up to kings, queens, and the elites to be flashy and have all of these goods. People had a few outfits, pots, pans, couple spoons, couple farm equipment, tools, and they were good. People didn't even bathe every day. So the people weren't stressed up with acquiring all of these materials that they couldn't even use all of the time. But he started that. And the last thing he did was that he needed to have popular, affluent people convey his message. He needed popular, known authority figures or celebs to push his agendas because people looked up to these people, right? So he connected all of these things, and that's how he went about pushing his propaganda. Now, in 1929, with the tobacco company, there was a New Year's Eve, a New Year's Day parade in New York every year, one of those parades, and it was really popular. So he hired some beautiful women. I think a couple of them even might have been pretty popular at the time. He got his own crew together, the cameramen and the writers from different magazines or whatnot. And they were to light the cigarettes on his cue, and they would be lighting their torches of freedom, right? Now, in their minds, they're just pushing the social issues forward. They are moving the constraints of society against women. And in the way they did, but really they were benefiting the tobacco companies. That was his main, the tobacco companies hired him. So that was the main thing for him, to get more sales. And he did just that. On his cue, the women lit the torches of freedom. They smoked the cigarettes. And the news spread like wildfire in all of the newspapers, TV, tabloids. And boom, the tobacco companies, they shot off. Now women everywhere were smoking, and they thought they were, helping out the overall cause of women. And like I said, in a way they might have, but they got women to smoke cigarettes, what was unhealthy. And then the tobacco companies made a lot more money, and that was the prime agenda for them to make more money, right? So this guy was slick. He did a lot of things, and he knew and understood group psychology because he teamed with a bunch of well-known psychologists back in his day to understand groupthink, right? He was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he ended up teaming with a lot of psychologists to understand how people interact, how the group influences the individual. And it is a lot of pressure when a lot of people think this, and you kind of the only one over here, a couple of y'all thinking this, y'all, you become outcast, you become ostracized, right? So he understood that. He understood that the pressure that a group can put on an individual. He understood how to make people connect their self-efficacy, their self-worth, their self-image, their self-esteem with external objects. Before this guy, advertisement was way different. People ran advertisement like straightforward. This car has this much room. This car engine is this size. It's this color. And it gets this many miles to the gallon. But Bernays came along and found a way to make it this, since it was so many goods and stuff was so somewhat more affordable. Now this could express who you truly are. This could illustrate your status, your wealth. This could express your colorful personality. That's what he learned to get ads to do to people, to connect with their self, and for it to mean more than just the object to them. The object is a part of them. So he really did it big on that one. And I don't know if he was right or wrong about the average person being an idiot, but if we were to use consumerism as the barometer, if he was right or wrong, it looked like he had some justification in his beliefs, because consumerism is taking a hold of too many people, right? One example is back in 2009, South Korea spent over $38 billion, which was like over, I think, 2% of their whole country's growth income. And they spent it on environmental friendly jobs and trying to change the carbon output and all of that. Guess what happened in 5 years? They had like a 10-year plan where within 5 years, the emissions has done increased like over 11% anyway, and consumerism went up. And that's the damage is done. Like, America is already bad with it, but there's a lot of other countries catching up, and people wonder if the earth is going to be able to sustain. Probably not at this rate, right? But yeah, so it's just good to know how all of this stuff started and why do we do it. Because a lot of people just do things mindlessly, but this was actually designed. Consumerism was designed for idiots, So get your brain game up, man. Make good decisions out here. Put money into things that's going to make money for you. Don't fall into consumerism or just any other bullshit out here. Always elevate, always grow.